Okay, so just as a continuation from that first Windows video, the first one we looked at that there, I'm now going to just work through this window here. So what we have over here was a double glazed casement window. So that type of window where you have the frame fixed in and you have those casement parts that can open out, whether it be that way or whatever else. The next window in many ways, it's probably a little bit easier to do. It's a more high performing window. We've got a triple glazed window. That one was double glazed and just a fixed frame. So one single frame that doesn't open or close is just fixed into place and it's there for viewing out of. Alright. The detailing at the bottom and the top are pretty much the same. The main difference is the window frame is slightly different, and I've done triple glazing here as opposed to double glazing there. Alright, so I'm going to get working on that, and having gone through it in the previous video, I'm going to work maybe a little bit faster just to help us get through those parts. Okay, so I'm going to keep it in line with the other window over there just for the sake of keeping it in order and neat and tidy. I'll zoom in a little bit. I will draw a vertical line and then measure my cavity wall. So that's going to be outside of my cavity wall. So 100 millimeters for the external block, 150 millimeters for the cavity, and 100 millimeters for the internal block. We're working at a scale of 1:10 again. We're drawing all this work in lightly. I'm just going a little bit heavier for the sake of the video, the camera, but light is what you want to do with everything. You may remember that we're going to have our windowsill fixed or built down into the inner external leaf of the wall. Sometimes you will see a detail where the windowsill is sitting up here and they fill it back in with cement here, which is fine as well. Either or is fine, but I prefer just to have my windowsill built down into the block there. Roughly pick the middle of the cavity for my windowsill. I will measure down 100 millimeters and measure across 275. That is just a standard size that's in the book, but we always say it, there is room for variation on that. It depends on where the windowsill has been purchased from. Once I've done that much, those two sizes are how we operate off our windowsill, and then just going to make my own judgment on how far up to come here, make my own judgment on how far to come across there, down a little bit, and basically just get that general shape of a windowsill. That's what they all pretty much look like. Alright, you can go heavily around that then if you like. The cavity wall is pretty much done, so you can go heavily down along there, and we'll go heavily down this part as well. We'll draw into position some blocks, so 22.5, 225 millimeters for our cavity wall, our blocks, and that's that. Next I'm going to draw my cavity closer. We'll go about 3 millimeters for that, so 30 millimeter cavity closer. They can vary in size, don't overthink it. And then my cavity installation inside of the wall, and draw that down. We get assembling for that, so our cavity closer has insulation inside of it. So we'll do the rigid insulation sign for that, or symbol, and then we will get our symbol for the rigid insulation inside the cavity. Now at this point we are ready to do the window frame, but I would prefer when I'm doing these drawings to actually draw the head of the window first of all before we do that, so we can line everything up properly. So what I'll do then is I'm going to leave that for the moment and go to the top part of the window. So lightly extend these lines up with your 2H pencil. We all know now at this point that the cavity wall above it, or the window head, needs to line up exactly with that of the window sill section. How far up here do we go? Make your own judgment. The size or the height of a window all depends on the architect's design or the manufacturer's design. So I'm going to just pick that point there to give the window a reasonable looking size and extend up the cavity wall there. I'll draw my cavity closer in. There. And my internal cavity insulation, that position. We will have, as we all know, above a window we have pre-stressed concrete lintels, 18mm in height for those. So there and there, that would represent the reinforcement steel. Your concrete lintels are there to support the wall above the window. And I can now just maybe do in my symbols for the cavity closer insulation. And symbol for the rigid cavity insulation. Okay, I will also draw maybe a couple of blocks, 1 or 2 blocks in there, 22.5. I'll get a second one in as well. Okay, we're now ready to draw the window frame on the top and bottom of this window. So I'm actually going to rub out these lines here now. These are guidelines, and I'm going to be using guidelines to match up the window frames as well. So we'll just rub these out to avoid any confusion when we're doing that. Size of this window frame, as we always say, will vary, so we're not going to overthink it. We're going to use a standard for the size that we'll use. Basically, we're just going to draw a rectangular shape, and we'll put these little angles on the side of it just to give it more of an aesthetic look. Alright, the size I like to work off of for these kind of windows is 100mm wide by 70 or 80, whichever you prefer. Position of the window, really it can be anywhere along here, so if you want to start your window frame there or start your window frame there, that's fine. For this drawing I'm just going to start it here, and I'm going to make it 100mm there. I'll just zoom in a little bit more on this section. So 100mm there by a height of 80, and I'm basically just going to draw a rectangle in that position there. Alright, now I'm going to just put a little slot down here to allow my triple glazing come into it. How big is that slot? Again, make your judgment. I'm going to come in 2mm from that side, 2mm from that side, and I'm going to go down about 4mm there. So you can sort of use those measurements as a guide, but ultimately you're kind of in some ways designing your own window frame and doing that. I'm going to put a little angle there for aesthetics. And then we can just go heavily around the outline of what we want. Alright, And that's the window frame. It's a thermally broken window frame, so we're going to draw some insulation in the middle of that, so there's no thermal bridges coming through that window frame. And I'm going to do that window frame on the upper part of the window, also the head of the window. Make sure that it's perfectly lined up. Bring up my guidelines. These need to match perfectly. So I now have the position there straight away. I just need to mark my 80mm for the size of that rectangle. And to mark those, I can even just bring this guideline up here as well to guide how far in for that slot. And I went down, I think, 4mm there. And then I want to put a little angle on the sides, just like the bottom part of the window frame as well. Okay, so there's the top of the window frame done, along with the bottom of the window frame. I might just rub out some of those guidelines now to avoid any more confusion. And we have triple glazing going into that part of the window. Triple glazing each unit. Oh, I forgot to put in the insulation of the thermally broken frame here as well. Thermally broken window frame there. So as I said, usually like a millimeter thick. Okay, so to do the glass on the window frame, so the triple glazing, you know, I always say use the paint to be about a millimeter thick. And you could measure that evenly and, you know, go through all that, but to be honest with you, if you just use your eye and make your own estimation, I think that will work fine as long as it's neat and it works out evenly. If you look at this sketch here, that's like the window frame that I sketched on the bottom. Using your eye, I just evenly space out. There's one window pane, there's a middle window pane, and there's the outside window pane. So, and then extend those all up to draw in your window, your triple glazing. That will work out there. Alright, so it's a handier way. I have marks in on the bottom of that. Alright, roughly done. And they're going to guide me. As I said, if you want to measure it all, you can, but if you can do it with your eye, evenly space those out, it should work out fine. So there's the one pane of glass. There's another pane of glass, and then I'm going to add in the middle pane of glass next, just like that. All right, and that's your triple glazing in place there. DPC work needs to be done then after that, or maybe I'll put in the window board in here. So window board 20mm thick on the inside of the building. Extended out past the wall, and a bull nose on there. Alright, so your wooden window board there, DPC, the black pen. Across the bottom of that, up the underside there, there's also a little drip that goes on the front of the window sill to stop water from creeping in. We go to the top part of the window, there's some extra insulation on the inside there, but we'll do our DPC first. So a vertical DPC on the top, and across here, across the insulation, down underneath here, and down the front of the window to stop any driving rain or moisture being driven up through there. All of this work, all of this exposed work is then just cleaned up or tidied up by the plaster. The internal plaster is usually around 12mm thick. So that hides away your lintel and your block work and even any cavity closure that's exposed. So on the inside it's called your internal plaster. On the outside it's more of a external render. Which tidies up the whole outside part, and that also goes along the bottom as well. That's pretty much all the detailing that needs to be added. We'll just zoom out. At that point then it's time to start adding labels. So as always, nice and neat and tidy with our label work. We'll extend out some straight lines. So I've got a cavity closer there, internal block, insulation, cavity, and so cavity closer, 100mm internal block, uh, 100mm cavity insulation, cavity, and external block. Okay, over here we have a window sill. The two measurements we always work off of there, 100mm by 275mm concrete sill. A window board, so 25mm window board. And here our window frame was 100 by 75, again that can vary. Fixed window frame. You could mention also that it's thermally broken if you liked as well, because of the thermal break in that. We've got triple glazing. Here, if I was to go to the top, I don't need to label all of the wall and the insulation again on the top, but I will label the DPC, or vertical DPC that's called. The DPC actually behind the windowsill needs to be labelled as well. There. And we need to label our 100 by 80mm lintels. And we'll label a plaster up here, so 12mm. And then 18mm outside render. Alright, that's pretty much all of our labelling done. And what we have there is a similar detail. The only difference is the window frame. It's a fixed window frame with a triple glazed unit inside. Like that over here, a casement window, a little bit more complex with the window frame and with double glazing in that. When it comes to window detail, we mix and match between those. It's good to practice both of them, just for getting used to getting those done in the correct space of time. Alright, and that's that drawing complete.